Welcome to day 34. Okay, let's start. We got a few folks that want to present bills. Senator Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two bills this morning. Senate Bill 6, Senate Bill 32, under modified structured rule. Senate Bill 6 is commonly known as the drone bill, which extends the prohibition on drones to drop contraband into our state places of incarceration, such as cell phones, drugs, and weapons, and also put some restrictions on photography. Be happy to answer questions.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, right here, right in front of you. Hey. that it's not against the law now to enter restricted space, a correction facility, and drop something in. That's illegal.
As you know, the criminals tend to run ahead of the law. The technology runs ahead of the law, and this just adds a subsection to our existing penal code that adds drones to the methods of delivery for things that are already prohibited.
Whip Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I certainly agree with the intention of this bill. I think it is a problem that we see in our corrections facilities that people are using technology now to try and get contraband to inmates and then take photographs. My concern is on line 17 where we say for criminal purposes. If it's just going to be unlawful for someone to intentionally photograph, do we necessarily need the language criminal purposes? And if so, can you define criminal purposes for me?
That language was added by the House subcommittee that considered the bill in order to address concerns that companies that might be doing satellite work, like Google, for example, who don't have criminal intent would unintentionally be caught up in the law. So that's why that language was added.
I think there's one other issue with it, isn't there? No, I think that the problem is that it says you can do it with criminal purposes if you've got permission from the warden. And I don't think that's what we intend to do.
I'm certainly happy for you guys to take a further look at that language.
Whip Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for reminding me of that. With that being said, we are going to recommit the bill just to work on the language. So I'll make a motion to recommit.
Motion second. Any objection? So ordered.
Did you want to hear about Senate Bill 32?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this one is commonly known as the hot dog bill. And this one extends Good Samaritan protection to people who rescue an animal in distress from a hot car. My lawyer friends on your Judiciary Committee changed the language to make it, I think, actually better. And I support the changes that were made and be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
Senator Hofstetler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got one bill today, and it deals with the Georgia School of Orthodontics.
Yeah, let me interrupt a little bit. For members of the committee, because we're getting so close to the end of the session, we have bills on the consideration calendar that we are allowing the authors to present, but they are not yet in your book and won't be in your book until after the committee report's read this morning. So we will not be putting any of these bills that are not in your book on the calendar, but at the same time we did want to give the authors the chance to present those bills. So if you're looking in your book for some of these bills, you may not find them, but those bills will not be put on the calendar until you've had a chance to review the bill.
And this particular bill is the first one on the back page side, Senate Bill 91. The Georgia School of Orthodontics will graduate 18 of their residents this September. This is their third year, and this is an attempt to put them on the same accreditation schedule as the other private medical schools. We do have an accreditation agency for the private schools, but in the case of medical schools or with dental schools, it's CODA, the Council on Dental Accreditation, that does it, and we've accepted that for all other schools. Emory is that way, Morehouse, Mercer. When Emory had a dental school, it was that way. So this is trying to eliminate unnecessary bureaucracy and double accreditation. There were some input from the Medical College of Augusta, from the State Accreditation Agency, and the Dental Association wanted it changed to orthodontics. They had some concerns about it maybe appearing to be dental hygienist school, which wasn't the intention. So we accepted all of their language changes, and we've got no opposition from any groups to this, and it will eliminate unnecessary bureaucracy.
You have no questions?
Thank you.
Senator Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to the committee Senate Bill 207, which is a little less than halfway down on the front page in the modified open rules section, Senate Bill 207. It was brought to me by the Physician Workforce Board. They requested a name change, and the new name will be the Healthcare Workforce Board because their scope is increased. I'll be glad to answer questions, Mr. Chairman.
You have no questions?
Thank you.
Senator Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring before you Senate Resolution 19. It's on modified open rules on the first page, the second to last one. What this does is create a Freight and Logistics Commission, which will disband December 31st of 2019. And what we're going to look at is moving freight and logistics through our state and coming up with a holistic approach. As you know, with the river being deepened in the port of Savannah, having a 60% increase, freight and logistics moving through our state is it's a key economic engine, and we want to look at that. And both Chairman Tanner and I will co-chair this commission and look at freight and logistics through our state.
Is there not an identical resolution that Chairman Tanner authored that's over in the
Yeah,
Senate?
it is.
What's happening with that resolution?
It is going to be heard on Tuesday.
You have no other questions?
Thank you.
Senator Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I bring two bills before you today. They're on the second page. Senate Bill 184 deals with state health employees' health insurance plan, and this allows them to use a federally qualified health center as their primary care physician. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions?
Okay. And then the other is Senate Bill 168. This is a nursing compact bill that the numbers I have is there's 1,363 nurses that are currently operating under this compact. There was some language added to it when it came through a couple of years ago that puts us in danger of losing that compact, so we would like to not lose that compact because this could affect roughly around 2,000 nursing jobs around the state and cost millions of dollars. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions?
Thank you.
Senator Rett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my fellow representatives, colleagues, friends, and y'all. I'm here today to talk to you about Senate Bill 20 under modified structured rule. And basically what it does is the bill allows the DCA to designate banking improvement zones to encourage the establishment of branches or representative offices of a bank in an area underserved by banking services. Local governments may apply to DCA to designate a banking improvement zone within their jurisdiction, and the DCA may exercise discretion and consideration. Basically what it does is it tries to address banking deserts by working together with the banks in the municipality. There's an agreement between them. This bill, I brought it, passed it all the way up to rules last year, but I had an old Air Force injury, and I had to have my knee replaced, so I couldn't finish the process. But this year, on 2 good artificial knees, I was blessed to be able to bring it back again, and I appreciate everybody's consideration. Thank you so much. Any questions? I'll answer them.
You have no questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to take a few House members. Mr. Smith, come up here, please. Mr. Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here today bringing a bill. This is Senator Ed Harbison's bill. He and I are delegation members. It is SB 140, first page, modified open rule. There is a statute going in Warner Robins to commemorate the World War I pilots. On one of those pilots, Mr. Eugene Ballard, is a native of Columbus, Georgia, of which Ms. Hughley, Senator Harbison, Representative Smyrie, Representative Smith, Representative Buckner, and myself are all delegation members. And the date to finish this was July 28th this year, and he's not going to quite finish, so we'd like to extend that date to December 31st so that the gentleman can finish the statute. Appreciate your favorable consideration.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First page, second one down, H.R. 261. H.R. 261 regards formation of a study committee to explore and advise this body on the delegation of medical interventions to advance practice registered nurses and physician assistants. Georgians have high expectations for the training and experience when they walk into a doctor's office. This has been largely achieved through the medical licensing program. Practicing medicine requires a license. However, medicine and surgery has always been a team approach, with doctors and nurses and many others being a valuable part of that. This resolution to do a study committee helps inform the decisions on when it's appropriate and safe for physicians to delegate those Medical Practice Act requirements to others who are also highly trained, advanced practice registered nurses and physician assistants. So this will help, I think, us along the way as we can safely delegate those powers.
All right, that was originally done as a joint.
Yes, sir. It was originally a joint committee, but crossover.
And I understand that there might be an amendment that would change it to just a House resolution.
Correct. Yes, sir.
And is there a similar Senate resolution making the rounds?
That is working its way through the Senate side. Yes, sir. And the plan would be to meet together so that the members from the House and the Senate would together look at this and come up with some advice and recommendations for these two bodies.
All right, Whip Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've spoken with Representative Newton, so I'm going to offer the amendment AM 331860 that simply would make this solely a House study committee. Again, as he's underlined, he's talked, I think, to the Senate sponsor, and they're going to move one as well that's solely a Senate, but then they're going to plan on meeting jointly. We just couldn't get these done before crossover. So that would be all the amendment does is correct the language to make it just a House committee.
All right, there are no other questions.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. I have a number of three bills I have on the calendar today. The first one is on the second page, the back, third down. That's SB 100. This deals with a program that the Public Service Commission currently oversees that provides assistance to people who are hard of hearing that are in need of devices to allow them to use their telephones. SB 100 just clarifies that the devices allowable under that program will include digital devices, and that includes wireless devices as well, a digital device would.
You have no questions.
Okay. SB 212, that's second from the bottom on the back page. That deals with, currently under our driver's training programs, there's no mention of online courses. This, even though they are currently being used, this clarifies that they are allowed to be used and provides some further clarification when they're used and how they'll work together in conjunction with the 6-hour license and structure, the private in-car instruction. That's what I was looking for, the 6 hours of private in-car instruction. So it just kind of clarifies the code with the addition of that online training and how that would work together.
Representative Martin.
Senator, a question about that, and I don't find it in a book. I'm sharing a book here, and I looked over that briefly last night. Pardon me. It looks like in order to provide the on-road test, you have to provide the classes at the same place. Do I read that? And my question, I guess, goes to this: is this limiting? Even though you're allowing the online courses, is it limiting folks' choice to where they can go and get them? Is it somehow handcuffing?
The intent is not to do that. I'm not sure if there was a substitute that was recommitted and there was substitute language that was put in. The initial language was very confusing, and I don't know if the substitute is available online yet. I know that I have a copy of that language here. The intention is not to limit your options, but to give people all over the state of Georgia more options. Because the reality is that not every person in Georgia has a driver school nearby, so we want to allow those online courses to be given.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, I can get with you afterwards. It looks like you have to take the online course from the place you would then take the test, and that's what I was wondering if that was the intent. I can get with the senator afterward, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brother Martin.
Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the gentleman, is it not true that when Georgia passed in this legislature several years ago passed the Teen Driving Act, they required driver training in one shape, form, or fashion. We also, at that time, in subsequent years, we passed the Online Act, so that the young adults that needed that 30-hour course, that didn't want to rely on the parents to do all those hours, that they could go online, which they've been able to do, and it is permissible, and that was what we were dealing with, and that's so that these same students to take the 6-hour online, the 6-hour course, actual hands-on, that if they go to a licensed driving school, licensed by the state of Georgia, that these folks can then go to that, and then once completing the 6 hours, then those driving schools can administer the test for the Department of Driver Services.
That is true.
Also taking a lot of the burden off of those folks, and that's what this bill does. They've been able to do it, and it was grandfathered out. This bill passed the House last year, and it got held up in the Senate on sine die.
That's correct. You're very knowledgeable in this bill. I believe that was your bill last year.
I believe it was.
I believe you're carrying that in the Senate this year, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe I am.
Oh, yes, sir. You're very knowledgeable, and I believe everything you said was correct, and would definitely yield to you on that, on your expertise on this matter.
You have no more questions.
All right, and finally,
excuse me, one more. Pro Tem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. But my understanding is that an actual reading of the words as it's been changed and gone through the process is that it would not change anything to do with the online, but in fact what it would do is it would restrict who would be authorized to provide the 6-hour training. Under current law, to provide the 6 hours of training, a provider administer the test, a driving school has to have been in operation for 2 years. This does not change that, but what it does change, in my read of the words, is that a driving school that could currently provide the 6 hours of training but had not been in operation for 2 years and so therefore could not administer the test, if this bill were to pass, would not be authorized to provide the 6 hours of training unless they because they would not be authorized to give the test. This would require that you take the 6 hours of authorized training and the test at the same place, therefore eliminating after the year 2020 any new providers coming into the market and offering the 6 hours. And so I think it would actually limit choice. And so I'd love to get with the author and the chairman and
Okay.
look at it further.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
You have no more questions.
Okay, and I do have, on the first page, under modified open rule, third from the bottom under that, there's a specialty license plate. This license plate, there's 2 license plates that have been included under here. One will benefit the Boys and Girls Club. The other will benefit autism awareness.
Chairman Harrop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but I just wanted to recognize the senator as the best dressed senator this morning. So,
This old thing?
yeah, thank you.
Right here? This old thing right here, Mr. Chairman? I treasure this. It was given to me by my good friend, Chairman of Ways and Means Committee, and I treasure it greatly. Thank you for noticing.
Senator Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. I left my scarf in my office over in the CLOB. Mr. Chairman, under modified structure rule, I have 2 pieces of legislation. The first piece would be Senate Bill 95, which concerns local government, terms for contracts and utility services. What this does is this allows the 56 communities within Georgia that are designated as electric cities to have the opportunity to enter into retail contracts with large Fortune 500 corporations on energy that they have purchased from hedge funds and other investment groups that come into the communities. We currently have an example of this occurring in the city of LaGrange. Currently, they're restricted to a 10-year contract, and we're just asking that be extended to 20. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chairman Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I appreciate you bringing this bill, and it's my understanding that the 20-year instead of 10-year contract coordinates itself with the financing of these very large solar farms, I guess you would say. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. Normally, the minimum contract they would ever consider is an 18-year contract because of their ROI and the amount of time it takes to get to where they need to get to the break-even point.
And without this change, those very large solar facilities probably would not be possible for the MEAG cities. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, sir. My second piece of legislation is Senate Bill 149. This pertains to motor vehicles that are stopped by law enforcement with an expired tax decal on the rear tag. What this does is it prevents the towing of the vehicle by law enforcement. What we found is in the past, first of all, it has a negative impact on the law enforcement resources, as it takes approximately anywhere from an hour and a half to wait for a tow service to get there and tow the vehicle, which ties the officer up. But the more distressing part is majority of the individuals who are ticketed for this are lower income individuals and those from one-car families. And having the vehicle towed, having the vehicle registered and stored in a towing yard tends to cause undue duress on these individuals. And what this bill does is leaves the asset in the hand of the violator until they show up for court. And if the time they show up for court, if they have not replaced the decal, then at that time the asset could be towed. But it does give them the asset to use to go back and forth to work while they're waiting 2 or 3 weeks to go to court.
Chairman Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Senator, I was trying to understand your bill, and I think this is one of the ones the chairman mentioned that's not in our book yet. So,
yes, sir.
I can't actually look at the language. But does this take, I think you understood you say this takes the ability away from law enforcement if they choose to have the vehicle towed, is that correct?
Takes the requirement away.
So it'll be within their discretion whether or not to have
Yes,
the
sir.
vehicle towed?
Yes, sir. And normally, in my experience of 30 years in law enforcement, most of the time, unless there are a lot of compounding issues beyond that, most law enforcement officers do not want to tow the vehicle again because of the time. And a lot of times, if it's a mother, 3 children, family, whatever, it's just the impact far outweighs the offense.
And forgive me if you mentioned this, but our police association and our sheriffs and our GBI and state patrol, their position on this is?
I've not received any position on it, but as past president of the Georgia Fraternal Order of Police, I've spoken to many of the troopers, police officers, deputy sheriffs, and others, and explained to them the legislation that I carry related to law enforcement, and have not received any pushback on this.
If you would be so kind, because I assume that we will not put this on today, but possibly at another time, would you check with the Sheriff's Association and be able to tell us what they think about it?
Yes, sir, I absolutely would do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 bills to ask for today, and they're both on page 2. One's kind of in the middle, SB 135. This is our annual workers' comp update. It raises the maximum weekly benefit for an injured employee that's on a lost time claim. It also increases the death benefit for an employee killed on the job, and it corrects a double dipping type situation for Judge Emeritus, where they can't, going forward, they won't be able to be Judge Emeritus and receive a salary. And let's see, it also on the 400-week for a permanent partial disability, it allows, after the 400 weeks, a durable medical device to be replaced or repaired, such as a prosthetic, for those situations.
You have no questions.
And my other bill is for the Division of Family and Children's Services. It's at the bottom of page 2. The Congress in February of 2018 passed a Family First Prevention Services Act, and it's related to our foster care system. And the impetus going forward will be to try to be proactive on the front end to keep children out of foster care and to intervene earlier. This bill aligns state statute where we can take advantage of the federal funds available to implement that program.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning I bring 2 bills on the modified structure rules, Senate Bill 43 and also Senate Bill 104 on the back page. Senate Bill 43 is a general bill to allow government bodies with electrical utility assets of less than $300 million in value the right to issue revenue bonds for infrastructure growth and power needs.
You have no questions.
And also Senate Bill 104. That is really just a clarification of the language in the law that we currently have as far as a do not resuscitate order issued on a minor or a child. It's really not changing the law. It's just to get rid of the word may. When a parent may consent orally in writing, we just want to change that language to remove that may just to make it clear.
Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, on the last bill you mentioned, SB 104, as I understand the bill that you are bringing to us, there was some uncertainty into the law as to whether or not one had to have parental permission to have a do not resuscitate order on a child, and this is making it clear that the parent or guardian would have to agree to that before it could occur. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman knows of which he speaks. Yes, sir. Thank you.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. I appreciate your favorable support.
Senator Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to y'all. Got 2 bills here on the modified open rule, Senate Bill 75. This is a little addition to the Veterinary Practice Act. They want to add a registered veterinarian technician to their state board. This will be an appointment by the governor. They also would like to create an entity that is comparable to what medical doctors have, so that a member of that profession that is facing some challenges to addiction, they can put them people in it and them receive some treatment, try to save a career, and this will all be confidential. Only two things in that bill.
You have no questions.
Okay. On the modified structured rule, Senate Bill 117, a retirement bill. I've been working for some time trying to find some little ways that we can enhance the financial position of our retirement systems. Our ERS and TRS both are grossly underfunded. We're looking at nearly $30 billion total liability there. We've got a number of old statutes on the books that allow people to buy in for credible service at less than full actuarial value. This bill goes by and identifies each one of them, makes some changes in them. Most of them, of these situations, is beginning July the 1st of this year. The lawyers are of the opinion that these people had that option when they were hired on, so therefore they have a right to buy in at the old plan, so this would just change it going forward. We don't have a real accurate estimate because they'd have to do actuaries on what this is being costing us, but the executive director of the TRS, his estimate is this cost us $30 million last year. Any questions?
Chairman Martin.
Chairman Black.
Yes, sir.
Number of questions, but the one I want to get to now on 322 in the bill, if you talk about buying in at full actuarial cost is what you're going to, and I know there are certain situations you can't do that. Isn't it true, though, that both of our retirement systems that are defined benefit systems, ERS and TRS, are using discount rates that aren't market driven? For instance, TRS is 7.5 and the 10-year return on that is 5.575. So the moment after the full actuarial cost is paid into the system, the next second, the taxpayer is on the hook for additional money. So, number one. Number two, in line 322, a new section is being added, 4727, that further lets them finance that interest-free over a 10-year period. And if it's full actuarial cost, it assumes that goes in at that moment and earns interest toward their retirement. And if the money's not going in there, it's been paying it in over 10 years, the taxpayers are then picking up the tab for that while the money's not there. So I don't see how this is full actuarial cost and not something that we're entering into a new contract to burden the taxpayers with.
Well, first off, I agree with you that the boards of both of these that are appointed by the governor, I do not feel comfortable in the job they have done keeping their actuarial assumptions up to date. I think that's something that the executive branch needs to address. However, if you look at it over a long period of time, they may not be as far off as what you might think. The other thing that you're referring to about letting them buy in, first off, if we don't do this, we're going to continue to be given that they're going to continue to be able to buy in because of old statutes. And if we don't do this, they're going to be buying in at these discounted rates. And one of the other provisions that I haven't mentioned here is that the GMA has come forward and asked for an exclusion on this. because they have some situations where they feel that it is to their advantage to give aid less than full actuarial buy-in to entice employees to come to work for them. And I will have to tell you this, our local retirement systems they make us look real bad, because we've got something like 500 local retirement systems, and about 490 of them are well funded, and they've been through the same recession and everything that the state systems have. Now, we've got a couple of these city retirement systems that are worse off than the state of Georgia, but the local retirement systems are to be commended, for they have been well managed.
Again, I want to draw back, if I can, Mr. Chairman, back to the gentleman's point. If we need to tighten it up to make sure people buy in at full actuarial cost, I'm certainly supportive of that. But by doing that and then adding 47-20-7, we're immediately undercutting it, because it's not full actuarial cost if you can finance an interest free over 10 years. I'm not sure we're gaining anything. I can get with the author, at another day if you'd like.
You have no other questions?
Thank you. Appreciate y'all's consideration.
Senator Harper.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Two bills. One is both of them are under modified structured. Senate Bill 72, which I have presented to this committee, I know twice, dealing with game and fish regulations. Does a multitude of changes there. I know that they made a few changes in committee related to the air gun provision and the suppressor provision since this Rules Committee sent it back to committee. So those are the changes since I last visited with you, Mr. Chairman, as I understand it. You
have no questions.
Senate Bill 153 was also sent back to committee by the Rules Committee, and the only change since I visited with you last, in my understanding, is a change in regards to local business licenses. That was my understanding. That was the reason it was sent back to committee, but I will defer to the chairman of that committee to answer any further questions about that, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it not true that while that bill was recommitted back to the committee, after further look, it was decided that it did not create any exemptions, and then it was sent back, passed back out, and sent back in its current form, so there were no changes?
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. That is true.
You have no other questions.
Thank you.
Senator Tillery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I present to you Senate Bill 106, back page, fifth from the top. You've heard a lot about this. This is the governor's Patients First Act. It allows the state to apply for two waivers, one to Medicaid to reform that program, and the second to the Affordable Care Act to help reduce insurance premiums for all Georgians.
Leader Trammell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question is respect to the 1115 provision in Senate Bill 106. My question is it the intention to cover every eligible Georgian below 100% of the federal poverty level?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. The bill actually allows for that to be a maximum amount. The bill also allows for, sets $1 million aside, as you know we've already done in the amended budget, for a consultant to review that and say if that would be what's the most feasible plan for Georgia going forward, looking at the cost and also looking at the coverage.
If I might follow up, Mr. Chairman. So I appreciate the gentleman's point, but the question is it the intention with respect to, because this is just an authorization,
Yes, sir.
Is it the intention through this authorization to seek an 1115 waiver to cover everybody that could be covered under 100% of the federal poverty level?
I think what the intention of the legislation is to allow a group to study and figure out if that would be the best answer for Georgia, tailoring a Georgia solution to what we know and I think we agree is a Georgia problem concerning access, quality, and care, but also taking into account cost.
Mr. Chairman, if I might ask one final question. And I'm sure as you went through the Senate debate and the testimony yesterday in committee, there was discussion about 100% versus 138%. Would you agree that that is an important policy consideration for this General Assembly as to where that line should be?
I would agree that it is an important policy consideration. Yes, sir, Mr. Leader.
Mr. Beverly.
Thank you, Chairman. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
If I draw your attention to line 23 through 25, once this is the intent that once this authorization happens, that there will be no further legislative action. So once the department gets, if this were to pass, then the legislation would no longer be the legislative body will no longer be involved in anything that has to do with the implementation of these waivers.
Thank you for the question. I'll concede to you that it would require no additional legislation, but I do not believe it's accurate that the legislature would no longer be involved for a couple of reasons. One, CMS itself requires a period of public comment, so even if you aren't a legislator, there will be a public comment period there. Furthermore, this will require an annual appropriation, so we will be involved every year in that process. If we decide to not fund that annual appropriation, then the waiver essentially is a null.
This gentleman, further year.
Yes, sir.
Question. Is the implementation, if this were to pass in 2020, would this waiver start in 2020, or would it be the intent that it would start 2021? Because just looking at the language, it's unclear about when this would actually start.
Thank you. And the process, obviously, I believe that the governor's office would like to start this process as quickly as possible. But we're not the only body that has to sign off on that. It has to be signed off on by CMS. It has to be signed off, and it has to be implemented. So our intention is to begin this as quickly as possible, but knowing that we're not the only variable at play here.
Whip Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to take a moment to ask a question because this is a very important policy decision we're about to make, and so I wanted to ask the gentleman a question. Isn't it true that by limiting it to 100% of the federal poverty level and not 138, that we would be avoiding dumping healthy individuals who already qualify for generous subsidies under private insurance into a system that is meant for those who are the most vulnerable in our society, and that by dumping them into the system, we would actually be weakening the system for those who it's actually intended to support?
Yes, sir, Mr. Whip. It would actually take in private citizens who have private health care right now that they're able to have up to about a 97% subsidy from the Affordable Care Act. If we were to expand to 138% of the federal poverty line, they would not be eligible for such subsidies. They would be forced onto a Medicaid system.
Thank you.
Leader Trammell, you've got an amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, AM 331893. This would just be an amendment that would ride out to the bill for the House's consideration, which would, it changes one word. It changes to a maximum of 100% of the federal poverty level, which is the language that's presently in the bill, to a maximum of 138%.
Pretty significant word, wouldn't you think?
It is a significant word, Mr. Chairman, and I would just say that, no state to date has received the advantageous funding for Medicaid for the recipients who would be covered under this at the 90-cent federal match. And so this language would just give the flexibility when we're seeking an 1115 waiver to ensure that if it did not work at a lesser threshold, that they would have a backup contingency ability to go and do what's fiscally responsible for the state of Georgia.
Okay. You make that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Is there objection? All right, all in favor of the adoption of the amendment, which would then go to the floor of the House, raise your hand. All opposed? It fails. You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have 342 bills to present, but only one of them made it on the page, so I'll just go over that one. On the back of the page, under Modified Structure Rule, fifth from the bottom, Senate Bill 167, simply deals with foster children and gives the department a little bit more direction as to when a family member is found. It simply says that they don't always have to be the best placement for that child. And so essentially what it does is it forces family members to come forward in a timely manner and gives the foster parents a little bit more preference on when they decide on the permanency of that child.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and members of the committee. I'm here to request SB1, CJ's Law. That's the first bill under Modified Structured Rule on the first page. This legislation provides the option of enhanced penalties for persons that cause a crash that causes serious bodily harm and then flee the scene of the accident. Current law assigns the same penalty range of 1 to 5 years to individuals involved in a crash that causes serious bodily injury and flee. This would provide it so that those that are the cause of the crash, the most serious actor that has the most serious responsibilities to the victims, would have the option of a 1 to 10 year range, so it gives our prosecutors more flexibility for a growing problem.
You have no questions.
Thank you very much.
Senator Underwood.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring before on the second page Modified Structure Rule, about 1/3 of the way down, Senate Bill 118, Georgia Telemedicine Act. We talked about it the other day. It reforms and redefines what is telemedicine and telehealth. The most important thing it does, it assures that both providers, the sender and the receiver, are reimbursed.
You have no questions.
No questions?
No
Thank you very much.
Senator Tippins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This morning I bring you Senate Bill 161 on the back page, about 2/3 of the way down. Under current law and practice, those students in high school that are taking advanced placement, international baccalaureate, and certain rigorous academic courses are given an additional half point when their GPA calculation is made for Hope Scholarship and Hope Grant. Those students who currently are making B's, C's, and D's get the half point. Those students making A's do not get the half point. If the intent of the legislation originally was to encourage taking more rigorous classes, I think we certainly ought to give the half point to those students making A's in these courses as well, and that's what this bill does. Thank you so much.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
Senator Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here to answer questions concerning SB 110, which is 6 from the top on page 2 under Modified Structured Rule. This is a version of implementing legislation for House Resolution 993, which was passed by the electorate last November.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
The Rules Chairman, Senator Mullis.
Thank you. Keep your seats. Keep your seats. Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you for allowing me to come in front of such a defined group of legislators in the House. And it gives me such honor to be here today. I have a couple of bills for you. The first one on page 1, Modified Open Rules, Senate Resolution 264. And Mr. Chairman, to be honest with you, we don't have to do this bill.
It's a study committee, and, you know, I've studied so long I don't need to study no more than that one. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you. And then Senate Bill 77, bottom of the first page, and this is a bill on history, preserving history. And I'm so honored to have you, Chairman Powell, and Chairman Fleming to help perfect it in subcommittee. This is the Monument Honorary Statue Preservation Bill. Be glad to answer any questions. And of course, Chairman Alan Powell will be handling this on the floor if you so let it.
Leader Trammell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know there was some discussion in committee on this point, but I wanted to ask you about who would have the ability to bring a lawsuit under the bill if the conduct was addressed. Who would have that ability?
Well, I would say anybody can bring a lawsuit, and lawyers got to eat too, I understand. So I'm sure you'd agree with that. So, I mean, you know, anybody can.
Chairman Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you for helping, again, perfect this legislation.
Happy to do so. To the minority leader's question, although it is true, anyone can bring a lawsuit for anything. The only lawsuits that can remain in court and not be thrown out is someone who has standing. In other words, if someone broke into your truck and damaged your vehicle, I could not sue the person civilly that did that because it is not my property. So by having standing requirement in the law, we require that someone has to have an ownership interest in this case, a monument before they can bring a lawsuit. Isn't that true?
Yeah, ditto. Yes. Thank you for helping me with that.
Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my good friend in the well, is it not true that this bill is a Monument Protection Act that protects all monuments?
Thank you
not
for
just a monument, but all monuments.
All monuments, no certain era, time frame, or issue. They're all monuments, private and public. Absolutely. Thank you.
Is it also not true that in this day and time that we're living in this day of civil disobedience and protest, that this is also a base of a law enforcement base, that to destroy or to vandalize private property or those properties that are dedicated to whatever it may be in history. But this is just a bill that would hopefully to prevent such of that, and if not, then they will pay a penalty.
The gentleman knows what he speaks.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, if I can help any of these members in my little old committee, please let me know. Well, I've got right now over 100 House bills just ready for deployment. So thank you for your consideration.
All right, you do have one question. You stayed too long. Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
and Chairman Mullis,
yes, ma'am.
I'd like to get with you and Chairman Powell about just a minor point in the bill. I very much support the bill. I just had one minor point I'd like to meet with you privately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Gooch.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I have 3 bills today. The first bill on page 1 is SB 79. This is cleanup language. I think there's just one word that's taken out of the language dealing with billboards. The word mechanical has been struck due to an interpretation from an administrative law judge. This creates problems for digital billboards, and it would allow them to be located closer than the 5,000 feet distance space that we currently have in state law. So the Billboard Association supports it along with all other parties involved. So it's not an attempt to locate billboards closer to one another. This actually helps to make sure that that 5,000 foot distance remains intact as we intended for it to.
You have no questions.
Senate Bill 2 is a bill that we've all been working on. You voted on a similar bill this year. House Bill 23 and SB 2 came out originally as companion bills, and they've both been changed somewhat. SB 2 allows 41 EMCs in Georgia to deploy broadband services around the state to their members, which they represent roughly 4.2 million customers in primarily rural Georgia.
You have no question.
SB 66 is a bill that I brought to you a week or so back dealing with small cell technology, also known as 5G, dealing with broadband and wireless solutions for local right-of-ways in Georgia.
You have no questions.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Kennedy.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring to you Senate Bill 157, which is on the second page, 7th from the bottom. This deals with the way that our public funds can be placed into banks in a better way. You may have received complaints from your cities or counties and not being able to place their public funds in banks because of the collateralization requirements under the current regulations that may basically make it difficult for banks to receive those funds. It's not a good business arrangement for them. We addressed this in part 2 years ago in 2017, and you may remember voting on the multi-state bank pledging pool that's been a success. This is targeted more for community banks. It's brought by the Community Bankers Association. In essence, it sets up a deposit placement program such that those funds can be deployed among other banks and utilize the FDIC $250,000 insurance level for those depositors. Your local banks like it, your large banks and small banks like it, your GMA wants it, your ACCG likes it. The banking department has approved this, and I'm not aware of anyone that has not approved it. But ask for your favorable consideration.
You have no question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lucas.
I'll have a good day.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here on Senate Bill 137, which allows for Tuskegee grads and faculty members to buy a tag in Georgia that has Tuskegee University on it. It is only authorization legislation. You have to bring the Revenue Department a $25,000 check, and you have to, and that $25,000 represents 1,200 tags have to be sold prior to any of them being made.
You have no questions.
Thank you,
You
Mr.
have
Chairman.
no questions.
Oh.
No. I want to recognize a former staff member at the Capitol who's now been elevated to judgeship, Terry Chastain, who is a workers' comp judge. Welcome back, Terry. All right, we're not going to, in the interest of time, take members' requests right now. You will get an opportunity later. Whip Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of discussion around Senate Bill 135 and in committee, but we're going to just recommit that. I'm going to make a motion to recommit that at this time.
Any objection? It's recommitted. Okay, we're adjourned.